and the galaxy would never look at them the same way again. The battle had unfolded with a terrifying speed. In mere hours, the Mothoan War Coalition's fleets had been shattered. The vast, powerful warships that had once threatened to crush Earth underfoot were now reduced to smoldering wrecks drifting through space. The human fleet, sleek and precise, had shown no mercy. Earth's tactical superiority, derived from decades of refining their technology and combat strategies, had turned the tide in a way no one had anticipated. Now, the Senate stood in the shadow of humanity's overwhelming success. The holographic projections in the chamber display the aftermath of the battle, debris from the Mothoan warships floating aimlessly. The damage was staggering. But what was more unsettling was the realization that Earth's forces hadn't just defeated the Mothoans, they had decimated them in a matter of hours. Captain Kane's image appeared once again before the Senate, her expression unchanged from the stoic resolve that had marked her every appearance. But now, her words carried a weight that had not been present before. "This is not a victory," she began, her voice unyielding. "It is a warning." A hushed silence spread through the chamber. The Senate delegates, still reeling from the suddenness and scale of the conflict, struggled to reconcile this new reality. The idea that Earth, only a few decades ago seen as a fledgling species, could rise to such power and decisively outmatch one of the galaxy's most war-hardened species was something no one had foreseen. "You have seen what Earth is capable of," Kane continued, her voice cutting through the tension. "We will not hesitate to defend ourselves, nor will we be pushed into submission. This is your final chance to recognize Earth as an equal partner in this galaxy." There was no immediate response from the Senate. Many were still grappling with the consequences of the previous day's events. The Mothoans, once proud and feared, were now nothing more than a cautionary tale of hubris. Their defeat at the hands of a species they had dismissed as insignificant sent a shockwave through the Senate, shifting the balance of power. Finally, it was Ardalia, the Rylurian leader, who broke the silence. Her voice, though soft, was filled with a mixture of caution and resolve. "Captain Kane," she said, "you have made your point. Earth's power is undeniable. But the galaxy is not just about military might. It is about unity, cooperation, and diplomacy. If we are to continue as a galactic community, we must find a way to reconcile your strength with the values we have long held dear." Kane's gaze turned toward Ardalia, her eyes narrowing slightly, as though weighing the sincerity of her words. "We don't seek to destroy what the Senate represents," Kane replied, her tone measured but firm. "But Earth will never be forced into the shadows again. We will protect our people, our colonies, and our interests, and we will not allow any species to dictate our future." A ripple of discomfort ran through the chamber, as many delegates began to realize that this was no longer a question of simple diplomacy. Earth was changing the rules of the game. The balance of power was shifting before their eyes. The Galactic Senate was no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. Earth had risen not just as a military power, but as a symbol of unyielding determination, a species that had fought and bled to carve out its place in the stars. And now, they would demand that place be respected. For the first time in the history of the Senate, there was a real sense of uncertainty about the future. How would the other factions respond to this new reality? Would they challenge Earth's growing dominance, or would they finally recognize the truth that had been staring them in the face all along? And what of the Mothoans? How would they lick their wounds and recover from the devastating blow to their pride and power? As the Senate deliberated, the image of Earth's warships continued to linger on the holoscreens, a constant reminder of humanity's newfound strength. Earth had won, decisively and without mercy, but the real battle was just beginning. The future of the galaxy hung in the balance, and Earth was no longer waiting for permission to chart its own course. Kane's final words before the transmission ended echoed through the Senate chamber, a chilling proclamation to anyone who dared challenge Earth's place in the stars. "We are not your enemies, but we will fight anyone who makes us one." And as the room fell into a heavy silence once more, the galaxy stood on the precipice of a new era. An era where Earth would not just survive, it would rule. The tension in the Senate chamber hung thick, like the calm before a storm. Captain Sarah Kane's words echoed through the room, her ultimatum now hanging heavily over the gathered delegates. For a moment, it seemed as though the Senate was paralyzed, unsure how to respond to the bold and unprecedented challenge posed by Earth. Many of the species that had long dominated the galactic scene, powerful, ancient, and proud, were suddenly facing the terrifying prospect of a new and unpredictable force in the galaxy. But the moment of hesitation was short-lived. The voice of General Galactic, the brutal and fierce leader of the Mothoan War Coalition, broke the silence. The Mothoans were a race known for their enormous warships, unyielding strength, and aggressive tactics. They were one of the oldest and most war-hardened species in the galaxy, and they were not a group to back down easily. Enough of this. Galactic roared, his massive reptilian form towering over the Senate table. We will not be bullied by this human upstart, nor will we allow them to dictate the terms of our existence. If Earth believes they can intimidate us, they are gravely mistaken. A wave of agreement surged through the Mothoan faction, and Galactic's sharp eyes locked onto Kane's projected image, daring her to challenge his resolve. Let them come, Galactic continued. The Mothoan War Coalition will show Earth that power isn't just about weapons. It's about dominance, and we will remind them that we are the true rulers of this galaxy. Kane's expression remained unchanged. She had anticipated such a response. The Mothoans had always been quick to resort to violence, and now they were about to show just how far they would go to defend their perceived authority. But Kane had no intention of backing down. She knew that this moment would define Earth's place in the galaxy once and for all. Before the Senate could respond, an alarming report came through the communications channels. Urgent transmission from Earth. One of the Senate aides shouted, "The Mothoan fleet has launched an immediate offensive against Earth's forces." The chamber erupted into chaos as holographic screens displayed the real-time status of the conflict. Hundreds of Mothoan warships, sleek and powerful, were surging toward Earth's outer defenses, a sight that would have made even the most seasoned generals in the Senate pause in respect. The human fleet, however, was already moving to intercept. The images of sleek, black warships cutting through space with brutal efficiency began to fill the screens. Earth's fleet is on the move, one of the Senate advisors reported. Their ships, they're unlike anything we've ever seen. They've already outmaneuvered the Mothoan advance. The first wave is being destroyed before it can even reach Earth's defenses. The scene shifted again, showing the sharp, lightning-fast movements of Earth's ships. They were smaller and far more agile than the massive Mothoan vessels, their advanced quantum drives allowing them to appear and disappear within moments. The Mothoan ships fired massive barrages of energy beams, but Earth's ships danced around them with terrifying precision. An explosion rocked one of the Mothoan battleships as a direct hit from Earth's particle beam weapon disintegrated it in a flash. Another Mothoan ship tried to retaliate but was hit with a concentrated wave of kinetic energy, crippling its systems before it could even launch a counterattack. The Senate watched in stunned silence as the Mothoans, whose reputation for destruction had been the stuff of legends, found themselves utterly outmatched by Earth's ingenuity and speed. The battle unfolded like a brutal dance, one that showcased the shocking difference in technology and strategy between the two sides. "Captain Kane's fleet is annihilating them," a delegate whispered in disbelief. From the center of the Senate chamber, a hologram of Kane reappeared, standing tall and resolute. "I warned you," she said, her voice ringing with a cold, final edge. "We are no longer a species to be underestimated. The Mothoans thought they could intimidate us, but they were wrong. Earth will not yield, and we will not hesitate to protect our future." The room was silent, the reality of the situation sinking in. The Mothoan fleet, once thought unbeatable, was being systematically decimated by the tactical brilliance and technological superiority of Earth's forces. The Mothoans had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were paying the price. The Senate's atmosphere shifted from one of resistance to quiet realization. Earth had proven its strength, not just in words, but in the most undeniable way possible, with force, precision, and the ruthless efficiency of a species that had learned to survive against all odds. It was clear now that Earth was no longer a mere player in the galaxy. They had claimed their place at the top. The Senate chamber was now a battleground of ideologies. Days had passed since Captain Kane's ultimatum, and the debate raged on, growing more heated with each passing hour. The factions were split, some eager to appease Earth, others determined to challenge its rise. But as the minutes turned into hours and the hours into days, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on every representative in the chamber. The galaxy's delicate balance was teetering on the edge of collapse. Meanwhile, on Earth, the leaders of the Planetary Alliance were not idly watching. A secretive, high-level summit was convened in the heart of the planetary capital, where President Elena Cartwright stood at the helm of humanity's most crucial decision. Earth's power was now undeniable, but with that power came an immense responsibility. As the leader of a planet that had transformed from an insignificant, war-torn world into a force that commanded respect, Cartwright had to navigate these turbulent waters carefully. "We've made our point," President Cartwright said, her voice steady as she addressed her advisors. "The Senate knows our power, and they know that we won't be swayed. But now, the real work begins. We need to decide what kind of future we want in this galaxy." Her words carried the weight of 1,000 possible outcomes. The question on the table was not whether Earth would dominate the galaxy. It was how Earth would fit into this vast, interconnected system of civilizations. The galaxy was a complex web of alliances and rivalries, and humanity could either become a leader or be a catalyst for an inevitable galactic war. "We can't afford to make enemies with every race," said General Marcus Ferlin, one of Earth's most experienced military strategists. "The Trelchans are itching for a fight, and the Mothons won't forget their humiliation. If we push too hard, we risk provoking the very war we're trying to avoid." President Cartwright nodded but didn't respond immediately. She had learned from Earth's turbulent history that peace was fragile and often built on sacrifices, but she also knew that Earth could not go backward. They had earned their place, and they would not be pushed aside by those who had once viewed them as a primitive race. "We need a show of strength, but we also need a diplomatic solution," Cartwright finally said. "The Senate has shown they won't just roll over, but there are others, like Falcor and Ardelia, who may be open to a partnership. We need to give them something to work with." Her advisors nodded, recognizing the complex task ahead. If humanity could foster a coalition of sympathetic factions, they could secure a future where they were not just respected, but also integrated into the galaxy's power structures. The question remained, however, could they keep the peace without losing their newfound strength? Meanwhile, back in the Senate, the factions were starting to coalesce around a singular idea, one that would either bind the galaxy together or shatter it for good. The Railurians, Galaxians, and several smaller species had begun to form a tentative coalition, calling for an emergency summit to discuss Earth's role in the future. Ardelia, still cautious but willing to negotiate, had pushed for dialogue instead of conflict. Her voice now echoed through the Senate hall as she addressed the assembled delegates. "We stand at the precipice of a new era," Ardelia said, her voice full of quiet resolve. "The decision we make today will shape the galaxy for centuries to come. Let us not choose the path of war. Let us choose the path of cooperation, where Earth is not an enemy but an equal. Together, we can forge a future where all species thrive." Her words were not just a plea for peace. They were a stark reminder that the Senate could not afford to ignore the growing power of Earth. Yet, even as Ardelia spoke, others, like Kex of the Trelchans, still harbored resentment, their desire for revenge clouding their judgment. "I will not stand by while Earth's might threatens everything we've worked for," Kex snarled. "They must be brought to heel." The debate grew more polarized by the moment, but just as tempers flared, Captain Kane's image reappeared on the Senate's holoscreens, her cold stare as piercing as ever. "I gave you a choice," she said, her tone calm yet firm. "We want peace, but we will not kneel before any species. Earth's future is our own to shape, and we will not let the Senate, or anyone else, dictate our fate." A long silence followed as the Senate members exchanged glances. For the first time, it became clear that the galaxy would have to change. Earth had made its demands, and now the question was whether the galaxy would accept them or be torn apart trying to resist. The Senate chamber remained cloaked in a heavy silence after Captain Kane's final message faded from the holoscreen. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy exchanged uneasy glances, their minds racing. No one dared to speak immediately. The weight of the situation hung like a dark cloud over them. It was the Rylurian leader, Ardalia, who broke the tension, her voice soft but commanding. "Perhaps it is time we learn more about the human race. We have seen their power, but we must understand the origins of such strength." Her words carried a diplomatic urgency, one that, although not without fear, sought to diffuse the mounting tension. A murmur of agreement rippled through the Senate, and the holographic screens flickered once more. This time, the images that filled the room were different, less about the immediate threat and more about the past. The Senate had not yet understood the full scope of Earth's potential, but this would change. The images on the screens shifted from the present to black and white footage. A small, rugged planet called Earth, its surface scarred by centuries of conflict. An ancient voice began to narrate the story, cutting through the hum of uncertainty. "This is Earth, circa 1942, an era before even the first human vessel reached space, a species on the brink of annihilation, yet still fighting. The Second World War was their most brutal, a time when their very existence hung in the balance." The Senate watched in grim silence as scenes unfolded, warplanes soaring through the skies, explosions shaking the Earth's cities, and armies clashing in brutal, relentless waves. The images were raw, full of destruction and carnage, but they showed something else as well, an unwavering drive to survive. Despite being technologically inferior to many of the galaxy's more advanced species, the voice continued. Humanity's greatest strength was its will. Through resourcefulness and sheer determination, they fought off invaders from their own planet. But that was only the beginning. The images shifted, now showing humanity's first steps into space. A rocket, simple by galactic standards, breaking free of Earth's gravity. A tiny blue and green marble orbiting the stars. The narration continued, tracing humanity's rapid advancement in the years following their first steps into space. In less than a century, humanity developed technology that could rival the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They mastered the use of nuclear energy, artificial intelligence, and, ultimately, the power of the atom. But it wasn't just their technological advances that set them apart. It was their response to conflict. The footage grew darker, showing footage from what would later be known as the Earth Wars, a series of interplanetary conflicts where humanity fought and won against alien invaders much more technologically advanced than themselves. Human fleets, though smaller and less sophisticated, utilized tactics that seemed almost reckless in their creativity. One particularly brutal scene played out on-screen. A larger alien fleet, the Excelenur, a species known for their sheer size and formidable weaponry, launching an all-out assault on a human colony. The humans, outnumbered and outgunned, employed a series of unexpected maneuvers that left the Excelenur fleet scattered and crippled, their flagship destroyed in an explosive burst. They called it the human advantage, an innate ability to think outside of established norms, a willingness to sacrifice everything for survival. The Senate watched, stunned, as the images of humanity's victories played out. Entire alien fleets, once thought indestructible, turned to debris in the wake of human ingenuity. And though the scenes were decades old, the message was clear. Humanity's resilience, their hunger for survival, and their tactical brilliance were not to be underestimated. The footage shifted once again, this time showing a different kind of battle. a political one. The year was 2185, and Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Senate, President Elena Cartwright, stood before the council. Her words were firm and unyielding, echoing across the room as she declared humanity's place in the galactic community. We are not a people who simply survive. We thrive, and we will no longer allow our fate to be dictated by others. The voice of the narrator now carried a tone of finality. Earth's history is written in blood and fire, and though the galaxy may think it can ignore this young species, it does so at its peril. As the footage ended, the Senate was left in stunned silence. The scope of humanity's potential had just been laid bare, and the room seemed to shrink around them. Their reputation as a young, unassuming species had been shattered. The reality was undeniable. Earth had the power to reshape the galaxy in its image, and they would stop at nothing to ensure that power would never be taken from them again. The question now was simple. The Senate chamber was a cacophony of voices, each one louder than the last. The representatives from various star systems, some alien, some human, and others composed of trans-dimensional beings, argued fervently. The Galaxian Trade Federation was the first to speak. Their leader, a sleek and silver-skinned diplomat named Thalcor, rising to address the room. Are we to simply bow to the whims of a species that has barely left their homeworld's orbit a century ago? Thalcor's voice echoed through the chamber, sharp and derisive. This cannot be allowed. A display of power is one thing, but to threaten the entire Senate, this is madness. An alliance of pacifist species, the Relurians, immediately countered. Their leader, a graceful, ethereal being with translucent wings, spoke with measured calm. The message is not a threat. It is a declaration of self-determination. Earth has the right to defend itself as any species would. Perhaps it is time to reconsider our stance on the young human race. They have proven themselves capable of greatness. A ripple of agreement ran through the chamber, but it was short-lived. As the debate continued, the tension built to a boiling point. The Senate was divided, but what was undeniable was the emerging truth. Earth had forced its way into the galactic spotlight with such force that ignoring them was no longer an option. Their presence was now an existential question that each species had to face head-on. Before the situation could escalate further, an unexpected event shook the Senate hall. The chamber lights dimmed, and a deep, rumbling sound echoed through the structure, followed by an urgent transmission from the outer sensors. Unidentified fleet approaching. A voice crackled over the intercom, the voice shaking with a barely contained panic. It's Earth's fleet, enormous. The atmosphere in the chamber turned from heated debate to raw tension in an instant. Representatives stood up, frantically scanning their consoles for more information. The monitors flickered, showing an image of a vast fleet of black warships, their sleek, jagged designs cutting through space like dark knives. The ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, fast, menacing, and precise. There was no mistaking it. The fleet was heading directly for the Senate's homeworld. From the silence that followed, Captain Sarah Kane's voice cut through. She appeared, standing tall and commanding on a holo-projection screen, her expression calm but undeniably fierce. Senators of the Galactic Senate, her voice rang clear. You are looking at the full might of Earth's forces. We have come not to conquer, but to ensure that our message is received. We are here because we will no longer be sidelined, and we will never be pushed into submission again. Her words echoed with finality, and the Senate hall seemed to shrink around them, the weight of her declaration pressing down on everyone present. We do not seek war, Kane continued, her tone unwavering, but we will not shy away from it if necessary. Earth will no longer be a passive participant in this galaxy. If any species threatens us or our allies, you will know the full extent of what humanity is capable of. The room was still as death, with every representative watching, awaiting the next move. The fleet hovered just beyond the edge of the Senate's defensive perimeter, a clear and present threat. A question loomed heavy in the air. Would the Senate act in defiance, Or would it acknowledge Earth's newfound power and adjust its approach to the galaxy accordingly? Time was running out. Kane's message was clear. The next step, whatever it might be, would define humanity's place in the stars. As Kane's image flickered out, the Senate was left in stunned silence, wondering just how far Earth would go to prove its resolve. Then, with one final, piercing glance, the image of Earth's fleet flashed across the holoscreen once more, a symbol of undeniable power, a reminder that humanity was not to be underestimated. The Galactic Senate had always prided itself on its unity, the cooperation of over 200 species working together for the good of the galaxy. In its hallowed chambers, disputes were settled with diplomacy, negotiations were measured and deliberate, and peace was considered an achievable goal. But today, as the message flashed across the chamber's main holographic screen, that pride began to crack. The transmission was brief, arriving from a distant, remote outpost known only as Earth, a planet that the Senate's most influential members had written off as a minor, unimportant speck in the far reaches of the Milky Way. Its people had barely reached the stars by galactic standards, and their fragile technologies, though growing, were nowhere near the sophistication of the more ancient and powerful species of the galaxy. But now, Earth had made its presence felt with one cryptic, disturbing transmission. The Senate Hall fell into an eerie silence, the weight of the message sinking in. An alien delegate, a tall, insectoid species from the Atroth system, was the first to speak. His antennae quivered in a mix of irritation and concern. "What is this?" "A warning," he demanded, his voice a low hiss. The human ambassador, an unassuming woman with short, dark hair and a stern gaze, stood with a slow grace, stepping forward to address the assembly. Her name was Captain Sarah Kane, the one Earth representative ever chosen to sit among the Senate's elite. She had spent decades serving the Earth's military and diplomatic missions, but this was the first time she'd had to speak in such a charged, unfamiliar environment. "We don't know who sent the message," Kane began, her voice steady, though there was an undertone of concern. "But it's clear that Earth is signaling something. And whatever it is, it's not to be ignored." The holographic screen behind her flickered, and a new set of images began to play, transmitted by Earth's fleet, showing battle scenes across the stars. The footage was grainy, but it left no room for interpretation. A massive battle, a lone Earth ship surrounded by enemy warships, their alien designs unmistakable, far larger and more technologically advanced. Yet despite the overwhelming numbers, the Earth ship, outgunned and outmatched, fought on with relentless precision. The screen zoomed in, showing a sequence where the Earth ship, battered but not broken, released a wave of energy that obliterated half of the attacking fleet in one devastating burst. The shockwave rippled across the stars. The message continued with a chilling declaration: "We have awakened the legacy of our ancestors. Prepare yourselves." The image froze, and Captain Kane's voice cut through the unsettling quiet of the Senate Hall. "What you just saw was only a small demonstration of Earth's potential. We have developed technologies that even your greatest fleets would struggle to face. The question is, why have you been ignoring us for so long?" A murmur spread throughout the room. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy exchanged uneasy glances. There was no denying it now. Earth had capabilities that made them a force to be reckoned with. The Atroth delegate, still visibly unsettled, turned toward Kane. "You claim to be diplomats, yet you bring threats to the table," he sneered. "I bring no threat," Kane replied calmly. "But the reality is simple. Earth will no longer sit in the shadows. We will be heard, and we will defend ourselves." The Senate was faced with a stark choice: acknowledge Earth's power and attempt to integrate them into the galactic order, or risk provoking a species with a proven track record of survival and escalation. The halls buzzed with tense whispers as the weight of the future hung over them. Kane stepped back, her expression unreadable. This is only the beginning. How would the galaxy respond? And more importantly, How much longer would they dare challenge Earth's might? The tension in the Senate chamber reached a breaking point. Delegates from various corners of the galaxy sat frozen in shock as the final image of Earth's past history vanished from the holoprojector. It had been a powerful revelation, one that exposed the true depth of humanity's potential. The Senate had never before been forced to confront such raw and brutal evidence of a species capable of such calculated destruction. Captain Sarah Kane's image flickered back onto the screen, her expression unchanged, as though she had anticipated the silence and shock. She stood in stark contrast to the indecision that now gripped the room. Her presence was a direct challenge to the complacency the Senate had long maintained. "I understand that this information," Kane began, her voice clear and unwavering, "may be difficult for some of you to comprehend. Humanity has been silent for too long, and perhaps we've been underestimated, even ignored. But that ends today. Earth is no longer a mere participant in your endless games. Earth is a power in its own right, and we will not be relegated to the sidelines." The words hit with the force of an ion cannon. For a moment, no one moved. Then the floodgates opened, as arguments erupted across the room in a cacophony of voices. "How dare you?" shouted Falcor, the silver-skinned diplomat from the Galaxian Trade Federation. "We're not here to be cowed by a primitive species with a few lucky victories. Earth has no place threatening us." The voices grew louder, clashing with one another, but Kane remained calm, unfazed by the rising opposition. She knew exactly how to turn the tide in her favor. With one quick motion, she raised her hand, demanding silence. Her eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the room. "The Senate's response is clear. You fear what you don't understand," she said, voice now a sharp, unyielding force. "But understand this. Humanity will not be confined to the margins of your galaxy. We are not your subjugates. We will not be restrained by your archaic treaties, your political maneuvering. We will act according to our own terms." Another pause, this one more pregnant, heavier with the promise of an ultimatum. "The time for diplomacy is over," Kane continued. "I have come to offer you a choice. We, Earth, will continue to abide by your rules, integrate into your flawed system, and contribute to the Senate's misguided peace. But only if one thing is guaranteed. Earth must never be restricted, never be limited. You will cease to treat us as a secondary race. We demand the right to defend ourselves by any means necessary, and we will not be contained by your cowardly alliances." She let the words hang in the air, each syllable a nail in the coffin of the Senate's idealistic vision of a peaceful, united galaxy. "But should you choose to impose limitations on Earth's development, to curb our power, then we will respond in kind. You will not be the ones who decide our fate." The room went deathly silent once more. Captain Kane's cold stare swept across the Senate floor, daring anyone to challenge her. Her presence was like a storm, one that threatened to upend the very foundations of the galaxy's established order. The delegates who had spoken against her before now found themselves unwilling to continue their protests, too aware of what was at stake. This was no longer about politics. This was a struggle for survival. Finally, Ardalia, the Rylurian representative, stood. Her wings fluttered nervously as she spoke, her voice filled with caution. "You speak of power, but what happens when that power becomes your own undoing, Captain Kane? What happens when you force us all to make a choice?" Kane met her gaze without hesitation. "Then we will fight, as we always have, as humanity always does." The response echoed through the chamber, cold and final. Earth had laid down its terms. The ball was now in the Senate's court. For the first time in history, the galaxy's fate no longer rested in the hands of the collective. Earth had taken its place at the center of the storm. The Senate was no longer in control, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The days that followed Earth's overwhelming victory over the Matones saw a stark shift in the galactic landscape. The Senate, once the undisputed center of interstellar governance, now found itself on the defensive. While some factions openly questioned whether Earth had gone too far, Others saw the human fleet's power as a formidable deterrent to the more aggressive species. One thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again. In the aftermath of the battle, the Senate was plunged into a deep crisis of identity. No longer could they pretend that the rules of diplomacy, with their carefully negotiated alliances and treaties, were enough to keep the peace. The existence of a newly risen military power like Earth had shattered the delicate balance, and many within the Senate feared that the human race might be the spark that ignited a galaxy-wide war. As the Senate convened, representatives from various factions gathered, their faces tight with worry. Even the once dominant Slarians, a technologically advanced race of telepathic beings who had long been considered the galaxy's moral compass, struggled to maintain their composure. "Earth's victory has made one thing clear," said Slarian High Counselor Makresh, his mind transmitting the words directly into the minds of those assembled. "We are no longer in control. The question now is, what do we do with this knowledge?" The chamber was silent for a moment, the weight of Makresh's statement sinking in. The telepathic leader's deep sense of unease reverberated throughout the room, and it was clear that the Senate was divided. One faction, led by the economically powerful Garlands, wanted to reach an immediate accord with Earth, lest they risk provoking another conflict. Others, particularly the Trelchans, an aggressive insectoid race, called for a hardline stance. "Earth has proven it is capable of overpowering any of us," hissed Thex, the Trelician representative, his antennae twitching nervously. "We cannot allow this to continue. If we do, the entire galaxy will be subject to their will. They will not stop until they have enslaved us all." A tense silence fell. The Trelchans had long been known for their militaristic stance, and their call for action resonated with many of the more war-hungry species in the room. But there were those, like Ardalia of the Railurians, who believed that war would lead to destruction on an unimaginable scale. "We cannot afford another war," Ardalia interjected, her wings folding tightly behind her. "We must act with wisdom, not fear. Humanity's power is undeniable, but we must find a way to coexist with them. A war would devastate us all, and the galaxy cannot bear that." The debate continued to rage, but one voice stood out, cutting through the noise with cold, calculated precision. "Earth does not need to be feared," said Thalcor, the Galaxian Trade Federation representative, his silver skin gleaming under the Senate's lights. "Earth needs to be understood. We've underestimated them before, but their might is real. Perhaps, instead of continuing to oppose them, we should work toward a more balanced future. A future where Earth is a partner, not an adversary." His word hung in the air, and for a fleeting moment, a sense of hope seemed to permeate the room. Was it possible that Earth could be integrated into the galactic order as an equal rather than a threat? Just as the debate seemed to reach an impasse, the holographic projection of Captain Kane appeared in the center of the chamber once more. This time, there was no bravado, no posturing. Instead, her face reflected the calm of a strategist who had already calculated the next move. "Senators," Kane's voice rang out, calm yet filled with authority. "I did not bring Earth to this point to threaten you. I came here to make one thing clear. Earth will not be silenced. Our terms are simple. Recognize us as equals, or face the consequences." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Should you continue to resist, we will take whatever steps are necessary to ensure our survival. But we don't want war. We want peace. On our terms. Work with us, and we can build a future together." Kane's image flickered, then disappeared. The silence that followed was thick with uncertainty. Some senators were relieved, thinking they had time to negotiate. Others were terrified, realizing that Earth had just demonstrated its readiness to escalate if need be. The storm clouds had gathered, but the outcome of this galactic standoff was far from certain. As the Senate deliberated in the wake of Earth's ultimatum, one thing was clear. The galaxy was no longer governed by old alliances or the slow diplomacy of the past. The future of all species now rested on the choices of a single young power, Earth. And somewhere, out in the dark vastness of space, Earth's fleet lay in wait, prepared to strike again if necessary. The gathering storm had only just begun.